on the vocal minority.
Are you part of the silent majority? Or are you part of the vocal minority?
Well, let's go. Attention, please.
If America can be saved, and I don't know if it's too late, but it'll be through radio shows like this new kind.
This shit here feels like a whole entire world collapse.
The revolution will not be televised, will not be televised, will not be televised, will not be televised. The revolution will be no rerun, brothers.
It's the vocal minority.
The revolution will be live.
Welcome to another episode of Vocal Minority Report. It's your boy MC. As always, thanks for downloading. You could have downloaded any podcast in the world, but you're here with us. We appreciate that. Thanks for all our new followers on Twitter. You can check us out at Vocal Report, Facebook / The Vocal Minority Report. And as always, please go to iTunes, leave a 5-star rating and review. Let people know you like the show. Use the hashtag The Vocal Minority to tweet. As you're listening, we can certainly converse about the show. It's a good way to draw attention. So thanks again for downloading. Hope you enjoyed this conversation with noted political commentator, author, and economist, Dr. Julianne Malveaux. And we'll talk to you after the episode.
Hi, this is Walt.
And this is Egypt from the Black Neighbors podcast.
And we're a part of the vocal minority. Let's do the original ones then.
Hi, this is Egypt from the Black Neighbors podcast. And I'm a part of the vocal minority. Yeah.
Hi, this is Walt from the Black Neighbors Hi, this is Walt from the Black Neighbors podcast. And I'm a part of the vocal minority.
I hate that one. You're like, hi, this is Walt.
Hi, this is Walt from the Black...
Hi, this is Walt. That's how it sounded. Let me show you how it's done.
Our guest today is an economist, noted author, and colorful commentator who has long been recognized for her progressive and insightful observations. She's been described by Dr. Cornel West as the most iconoclastic public intellectual in the country. Her popular writing has appeared in publications like USA Today, Essence Magazine, and The Progressive, with her weekly columns appearing in newspapers across the country. Currently, she's the honorary co-chair of the Social Action Commission of Delta Sigma Theta Incorporated and serves on the boards of the Economic Policy Institute as well as the Recreation Wish List Committee of Washington, D.C. She is also the president and owner of the Economic Education, a nonprofit headquartered in D.C. Her latest book, Are We Better Off? Race, Obama, and Public Policy, a book which takes a hard look at whether or not the Black community has truly benefited from President Obama's time in office, is available now. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Julianne Malveaux to the show.
Melvin, thank you so much for having me on your program. I appreciate it. Always good to have an opportunity to talk to our folks on a program like the Minority Report.
Hey, well, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. I know you're a very busy woman, so appreciate your time this morning. I hope you're doing well. Your point of view and perspective, I feel like, is so noted. I've seen you and read you before. I saw you earlier in the year on with Tavis Smiley. I think at that moment I was like, you know what, I want to get her on the show. And then obviously having kept up with you further into this political season as we've gone. So again, really appreciate it. But I wanted to start off with your book, though, right off the top, because it's a question that I feel like I've asked before. Maybe not your exact question, but I've pontificated about and had people on kind of discussing the meaningful impact of President Obama's presidency to the everyday lives of Black people. I'll just give a little background here. You know, like in my lifetime, and I'm only 34, but I never thought that we'd have a Black president. Like, it was not even something that really crossed my mind, you know, just living in this time. And then the fact that it actually happened in my grandparents' lifetime, who were 89 and 86, you know, and my grandfather was a delegate at a couple of conventions in the 90s, and they were able to go to Obama's initial inauguration. So anyway, I don't want to feel like the history and the impact is lost on me. However, it's something that it's kind of hard to put my hand on or quantify, you know, the real impact of President Obama's impact on people of color, Black people. So that's a bit of a long setup, but to hopefully get into your book and your overall opinion on that.
But the history is so very important because I, too, and I'm not 34, I'm 62. I didn't think I'd see a black president in my lifetime. And been at every Democratic convention since 1976. And I tried to tell the Bernie people that when I was in Philly that, when African American people participate in the electoral process, we always walk away with less than the optimal. Because we're never, it's a multicultural, multiracial nation, and we are the minority. So we're never going to get what we want. With President Obama, we got the symbolism, but we didn't get the substance. I mean, I think that I don't regret my votes for President Obama. In fact, I was very happy to have voted for him in 2008, a little bit less happy in 12, but still, happy to vote for him because of history. But I had really hoped for so much more than we got, and really am getting some sense in these waning months of his presidency, that I have a friend who says you have to always inspect your expectations.
Okay.
And what did we really expect? Did we expect Jesse Jackson? No, because Jesse Jackson ran for president, and he didn't win. And Jesse Jackson was very clear about our people. Did we expect Jim Clyburn, who is the highest-ranking African-American in Congress? No, we didn't expect Jim Clyburn because Jim Clyburn didn't run. So what we got was Barack Obama, who was kind of center-left, who had never been very strong on black causes, who had been thoroughly vetted by the Democratic machine. And we got him, and we got a bunch of black people who did not inspect their expectations. So we expected a lot, and we got him doing some very good things around things like health care. I think that his ability to shepherd us out of the Great Recession was good. Notice I said good and not great.
Right.
But I think at the same time, for example, historically black colleges and universities experienced a cut in funding. For example, he has pardoned some people in terms of nonviolent drug use, but he's pardoned 600. It's less than 600, but I don't remember the exact number. But he's pardoned almost 600. Gerald Ford pardoned 14,000.
Wow.
Let me repeat that number: 14,000 DAF dodgers with a basically a signature.
Right.
President Obama has said, his people have said, they've set up a process that, according to people that I've worked with, is very cumbersome, so that they're going through name by name. But if you're a nonviolent drug offender, you should just be released. So he's done some things, and some things that have been good, but there have been a lot of black people who have basically cleaved to substance, to style rather, and not substance. And you've got a lot of black people who actually become absolutely hostile if you even begin to question the fact that this man, though you're typical Democrat, and let me say that, though you're typical Democrat, that this man has not done as much for black people as he could have. In my book, I have a line. I said, yes, we can. No, he didn't. President Obama,
I like
basically,
that. Okay.
He didn't push us backward, but he didn't move us forward either.
Right. Okay. And I wonder if that has, how do we place, or where do we place the blame? And blame is too strong of a word, probably. But so, we talk about tempering our expectations, but is that a fault of him as a person, as a man, as a black man, or is that strictly related to the office and the limitations of that office and or our, political structure? Or is it a combination of the two, in your opinion?
It's a combination of three things, the two things that you mentioned. And then there's also the fact that our community did not push this president.
Okay.
You will not get fed in your mother's house if you do not bring your plate to the table.
Right.
If you sit and smell the fried chicken, and say, ooh, that fried chicken sure smells good, but you don't get any or ask for any, then mama will tell you, I'm frying it for other people. Then you can be mad. But if you didn't ask for it, then how dare you leave the house and say, mama didn't give me any chicken.
Right, okay.
And what we had here is black people who did not push this president, many who were reluctant to push this president, even afraid to push this president. Or, I had many friends in Congress who'd say things to me like, well, he's a black man. We don't want to push them too hard. Well, the GBLTQ community pushed them hard, and guess what they got?
Right, exactly. Yes. Okay, that's a good point. Very good point.
So, so in addition to the fact that this is a president who had limitations and had been vetted, you also had a community that was too proud of the symbolism to deal with the substance. And I'll tell you, I share the pride. Every time I saw that man get on Air Force One, I smiled. Every time. Or as we said, every time.
Right. Yeah.
Every time I saw the president get on Air Force One, I smiled. Every time I saw the girls, Malia and Sasha, I smiled. The first Easter egg roll at the White House, I smiled. But that does not turn my brain off. I can enjoy the symbolism and, at the same time, look at the substance.
Right. That's it's funny you mentioned those aesthetics, if you will, because when I remember when I saw him fist bump Michelle back in 2008, and then he patted her on her butt. Pardon my French, but he to me he did what you do to your wife. He just seemed like a black man. And those two moments, they just seemed like a very black couple, very black man. And I was like, okay, all right, but like you said though, but that is all very superficial in the realities when it comes to the things that truly affect us as people. And I wonder if sometimes because of class, more so than race, even that a certain point of black people who should be more vocal or could be more vocal aren't, because their day-to-days did not change a lot or wouldn't, because I feel that way sometimes, that, no matter who is in office, ultimately my day-to-day is not going to change too much because of the industry I'm in. And, I don't want to take that for granted, but perhaps I do. But I don't know if you find a role in, if we talk about black people specifically, and class relating to how they relate to President Obama and how those expectations may or may not have been set. Does that make sense?
It does. I think that, again, we as people, African American people, we have not been. Here's what gets me, MC, when I look at where we are, coming out of the Democratic Convention last week, is that we are not. We had a great convention. You had Leah Doutry running it. You had Donna Brazile, now the head of the party. Mignon Moore, part of the leadership with the Hillary campaign. The group of sisters who they have been continuous activists in the Democratic Party. Not many of us have been continuous activists. You just can't expect that power is not like peanuts. No one says pass the power.
Okay.
You say pass the peanuts. You don't say pass the power.
Right.
So from that perspective, I think we have to do some community soul searching as much as Obama criticizing.
Okay.
I think that we have to do both. And I think when we do the community soul searching, we'll find ourselves wanting for us to get so agitated every 4 years, but to not necessarily vote in down ballot elections, in city elections, run for school board, do things that we can do to push the pressure up. I think that that's part of the challenge.
And we've talked about this before on the show, that the only way, one of the major ways to affect change is to vote in local elections, because the actual change and things that affect your true day to day and will go up, start there. But, those turnouts are so low. And then I don't know the numbers for black people, but obviously it's got to be it's much lower than the general numbers. But you mentioned something though, talking about the leadership of the DNC. And it was a question I had for you actually later, but I'll bring it up now because there was an article in the Atlanta Black Star written by David Love titled "Black Women Ran the DNC, but will that translate into meaningful policies that benefit Black people?" And we don't have to get into the substance of the article. The title is pretty self-explanatory, I believe, but I do think folks should check it out. But I wanted to get your take on that question, since you just brought up if that and kind of what we're talking about, if you think that will matter going forward, and then obviously then I want to get your impressions of the convention as well. But do you think that does that?
I think it means something. I think there are some positives, but again, these sisters are Democrats. Understand that. They played the game by the Democratic rules, and I I say that's important because I need my friends who are Bernie supporters to understand that these women are Democrats. Bernie Sanders and his followers said that he wasn't treated fairly. Well, Bernie was a 5-minute Democrat.
Okay.
You know, he maintained himself as an independent for the longest time, and then suddenly he was a Democrat, and he ran on the Democratic Party, and he said the rules weren't fair, but he did not have people involved in the making of the rules. People like Donna Brazile have been Democratic activists since, I met Donna in 1984 when she was working for Reverend Jackson.
Okay.
And so it is going to make a difference in terms of access. I think that the convention itself, if you look at it and look at the optics were fantastic.
Right.
But I think we also know that optics and reality are sometimes two different things.
Of course.
We saw a whole lot of diversity, and I think the Democratic Party is relatively diverse. As you know, if we look at institutions, I think it's a very diverse party. So we saw lots of diversity, but in terms of power, especially when money is a huge part of the whole power sharing matrix, in terms of power, I don't think that. I think a lot of work still has to be done. But I'm excited. This, again, like the presidency of Mr. Obama, you know, having these women in these high places, with Leah Dougherty being convention chair not once but twice, having these black women in these high places is something to celebrate.
Celebrate, but you know, But
that doesn't mean we stop working.
Right.
I mean,
yes.
I think that's part of the challenge. Oftentimes, many of us are very complacent, so we see something happen, we're like, oh yeah, you know, everything is good. Well, yeah, everything is good, and we still have to keep working. You know, power concedes nothing without a demand, said Frederick Douglass, and never did it and never will. Those who want freedom without agitation are like those who want the ocean without its mighty roar. That is appropriate whether you have black folks in charge or white folks in charge or other people in charge.
Right. Yeah. No. And so how do you think, so if we talk about like the galvanization of Trump supporters and that the whole mentality now of the GOP, well, let's just be specific to Trump supporters. So how do you think, is there a movement like that for black people around this election, or is it because Hillary is, what is the response, or what should be the response from black people as far as being active and vocal, specific to the activity that we see from the Trump voters and the Trump supporters?
I think if you look at the Trump campaign, if you look at Mr. Trump himself, what you see is someone who is devoid of any kind of integrity, any kind of civility, anything that approaches good sense. If you look at Mr. Trump and his utterances, I mean, you can't help but to be repelled by the way that he chooses to talk about people. It is dumbfounding to me. It's astounding that this man has gotten as much traction as he has. However, he has, and he is the Republican nominee. Hillary Clinton is not a perfect candidate by any stretch of the imagination, but she is indeed the Democratic candidate. And I think that African American people should have learned from the Obama presidency to be supportive of Secretary Clinton, and at the same time supportive and also clearly very critical and demanding, so that this period from August until November is not the time to demand major concessions. But I think that as soon as the election is done in November, we want to make sure who are your appointees going to be, Hillary?
Right.
Who's going to be on your Council of Economic Advisors? Who are going to be your Supreme Court nominees? Looking at your cabinet, who's going to be on your cabinet? Who's going to hold your regulatory positions? Those are what are you going to do about HBCUs? And let's just call it down the line. And so I don't think that people, a lot of people know she doesn't get the cakewalk into the White House, but quite frankly, the alternative is stunningly frightening.
Right.
So I'm going to work as hard as I can to ensure that she's elected, and then I'm going to work as hard as I can to ensure that she is appropriate. listen to what Reverend William Barber said, and I hope you saw him because he was masterful. The minister from North Carolina who leads the North Carolina NAACP happens to be a friend, but other than that, he's wonderful anyway. But listen to what he had to say about where morality is, and essentially, she's going to have to be held accountable, just like anybody else would be.
I agree with that, and actually, I did listen, and I read your piece, your kind of recap on your observations of being there too, and you captured that. And one thing I think you captured in the speeches and in the Reverend speech was that you noted that he didn't use the word endorse, but rather that we should embrace her. I believe, and I'm paraphrasing his speech in your writing, but that rather we should embrace, and I feel like that's more accurate in what she needs right now, and kind of what you're saying. That, but there's so much to touch on when it comes to Hillary, because when I read your commentary on her, or I read your commentary on her speech, and you comment on how it exceeded your expectation, full of grit and grace, humor, humility, and respect, and was reaching out to the Bernie folks, and you could hear the glass ceiling shattering, and all those things I felt when I listened as well. But I feel like a lot of America did too, sensible folks. But there's still something about Hillary, and as you said, she's not the perfect candidate. But can we talk more about why you think that she lacks whatever that is? Because I feel that she's qualified. I respect her position as secretary, senator, all of her accomplishments prior to being, first lady, I think speak for themselves. And then obviously, since her career post first lady, but what do you think it is about her specifically that just does not resonate across the board, or is it related to gender? Is it related to her being a Clinton? I'm sure it's probably too much to put in one category.
Hillary has been in the public eye for more than 25 years.
Right.
So people have had a lot of time to make to take impressions of her, from her. She, I think, is a brilliant woman. I've spent a little bit of time, not a lot. I'm not her friend. I couldn't say that, but because she doesn't know me that well. But I've been in her company. I think she's smart. I think she's delightful. I think she's also very cautious. And why wouldn't she be cautious? She has lived a really good portion of her life in the public eye, and people have seen it, and people have been critical of everything from what she's had on her body to her head. What's people talking about her hairstyles to her marriage?
Right. How she reacts to infidelity? Right. Yeah. Right.
Exactly. And people are talking about she's an enabler, and the ultimate explanation might be that she's a woman of God.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yes.
Because indeed, when people say till death do you part, Bill's still here.
Yes, right. Speaking on behalf of his woman and taking a back seat to his woman, right?
Exactly. And he was so on script that it was amazing. But I think that, I have a 19-year-old godson who is majoring in political science at Dartmouth, and he's just such a bright kid. I'm so proud of him. And he often says to me, there's something about her. And I think that that's what a lot of people say about her. There's something about her. But we have to examine what we mean when we say that. I mean, where are we coming from when we say that? I mean, she's not warm and fuzzy. There are a whole lot of politicians who aren't warm and fuzzy.
Right.
And she's an intellectual. I mean, so she's not warm and fuzzy.
Okay.
I'm not warm and fuzzy. I mean, I'm a hugger, but that's about as warm as I get.
Right. And outside of this show, I'm not particularly warm and fuzzy either. So I got you. I understand.
So the fact that she's not. So people say she's not warm and fuzzy, and I say, so what? There are lots of things. I think that all the things we begin to unpack them, they're petty. They're small and they're petty things. People are still talking about all the crap that happened in the first year of the Clinton administration. That was 1992. That was more than 20 years ago.
You know what? It's funny you mention that, because that's one of the things I actually had it written down that, and it's like the crime bill and all that stuff. Like that stuff is really early it's over 20 years ago. But and obviously
the crime bill is another thing. I'm talking about things like the travel office.
Okay, gotcha.
Whitewater.
Oh, okay. Those things, I got you. Okay, right, yes.
The crime crime bill, I think we have to contextualize. The crime bill happened, I believe, in 1994. The Republicans had the Congress. We had crime rates in our nation that were soaring. Of course, stereotypes put a lot of that crime on African American people, even though we know that, white people commit crimes too.
Right.
Not two, more.
Well, yes, and there's more of them, and I've always, by virtue of that, there's always the numbers always going to skew more towards them. We just get lost in these silly percentages sometimes, but yes, but there's always going to be more of them committing crime.
But when you contextualize a crime bill, what you saw was a congressional response to rising crime rates. I think many of the rising crime rates had to do with economics and drugs, with people looking for work and not finding it, drugs being dumped in the African American community, quite frankly, and all of the side effects that come with drugs being dumped into our community. But having said that, most of the Congressional Black Caucus members voted for that crime bill.
Okay.
Most of the Congressional Black Caucus. The crime bill was an extraordinarily imperfect bill that was a result of some compromise. And so there are legislators who today will tell you that there was some good stuff that was in that crime bill, while there was some horrible stuff. 3 strikes is horrible. There are a number of things that were just horrible. But legislation, watching legislation being made, as someone said, it's like watching sausage being made.
Right.
If you watch sausage being made, you never eat another sausage.
That's correct.
Because they throw everything in there.
Right.
And that's a lot of what happened with legislation. Furthermore, this is a dilemma that Hillary Clinton put herself into, but let's be clear. Hillary Clinton was not the president of the United States when the crime bill was passed.
Correct.
Her husband was. She was not the president. But, Bill and Hillary Clinton have often said you get 2 for the price of 1. So you can't say it when it works and basically distance yourself from it when it doesn't work. So, so that becomes another piece of it. But the two of them, the crime, I don't like the crime bill. Nobody liked the crime bill. The Republicans loved the crime bill. No Democrat liked the crime bill. We lived with the crime bill. And so to then blame it on her, I think is just not fair. To say it's a horrible piece of legislation, aspects of it need to be repealed, that's fair. And you've seen the work of people who've done things like change the sentencing rule relationship with crack cocaine and powdered cocaine, for example. That occurred under Mr. President Obama with Eric Holder's, Attorney General Eric Holder's help.
Right.
So again, it requires activism to change these things. I think the reason that I'm so excited about the young people in Black Lives Matter is because they really forced both Hillary and Bernie. And really, enforcing Bernie, they forced Hillary to look at these issues in a way that brings fresh eyes to it. So I'm excited that the word reparations. Have you ever heard the word reparations being used in the context of a presidential campaign?
Not at all.
The Green Party doesn't say it. Democrats have heretofore not said it, but thanks to Black Lives Matter, both Bernie and Hillary have used the words reparations. I think that's exciting. It's exciting to me.
No, yeah, and it's definitely exciting to me.
So what you've seen is two things. You've seen a movement come out of, as a result of these police shootings of unarmed black people. You've seen a movement emerge from that, and as part of that movement, you've seen essentially young people push the agenda and force the issue. And that's what's going to be needed no matter who's elected past November. It's for people to continue to push the agenda, move the issue.
Right. That seems to be the most appropriate response. And actually, it's one that I was obviously born out of something else, but it seems to be now the response to the, as I mentioned, the galvanizing of the Trump supporters, or which a lot appears to be that backlash, the adverse reaction from Obama's presidency, these last 8 years, that all this, who knows if one has anything to do with the other as far as the shooting of unarmed black people and killing of black people. But, it has certainly come under fire in the last, 2 years specifically. And especially with the backdrop of this election, that Black Lives Matter is able to push the envelope and truly affect some change, and or at least make an effort, a strong effort to affect that change. So yeah, no, that's a very good point. So speaking of change and things, since you were there at the convention, I don't know tons about the Bernie delegation, and you wrote some comments about the Bernie supporters and your observations, but I wanted to ask you about like the Bernie walkout, the Nina Turner. Were you privy to, or what information do you have on that regarding like Nina Turner and those issues?
Sure, a couple of things. Nina Turner was supposed to put Bernie's name into nomination, be one of those, and she was taken off the program. She was taken off the schedule. I guess her speech did not pass muster. There was a lot of anger and resentment around that. I wish it hadn't happened. I'm a big Nina Turner fan. I met her when she was running for Secretary of State in Ohio. We have mutual friends. I think she's a brilliant woman, very well-spoken, and not only well-spoken, I mean, that's just a very committed progressive activist. And she would have been value added. I think that the campaign, the convention, the leaders of the convention may have worked a bit too hard to have unanimity in terms of voices. But I guess they didn't want a Ted Cruz moment.
Okay.
You didn't want someone to get up and say, vote your conscience, when obviously Hillary Clinton was the nominee.
Right.
So I do know that made a lot of people extremely angry. And again, I wish that had not happened. When you look at the history of presidential speeches, I remember 2004 when Al Sharpton was, it was all the same year that President Obama spoke for the first time. Al Sharpton had run for president, if you recall, in 2004, and he was given mic time, and I think he was told he had 7 minutes. And they had, as they always do, they vetted his speech. You give your speech, they put it on teleprompter. Man, when Reverend Sharpton got up there, I'm still laughing. My man reached into his pocket and pulled out some notes. And if he talked 7 minutes, I did.
Right.
I mean, he just did his thing. And at some point, to the chagrin, of course, of everybody, at some point they started lowering the podium. So it was like electron. It was big. So you saw the podium, and it would just start going down, and
right.
He just okay. But Rev doesn't need. He doesn't need any notes.
No, he's used to doing that, right?
Reverend Barber, who I called him the day after he gave his masterful speech, because as I said, he's a friend, and his daughter is a Bennett Bell.
Okay.
So, but
I'm sorry. You're the president of Bennett College. I didn't mention that.
I'm the former president.
I'm sorry,
President Emeritus.
Yes, Bennett College, correct.
But in any case, Reverend Barber said that he had to submit his remarks, and he submitted them, and then he said what he had to say, and some of the things he said were not part of the scripted remarks. So they had their because he said I don't know if you noticed, I pulled my notes out.
Right.
So the whole, Nina Turner could have said what she wanted to say, I think, if she had, quote, played the game.
Okay.
At the same time, I think it was a huge mistake to take her off program. I think she was extreme value added to program, and I think she's an important voice that did not deserve to be marginalized. Bernie people walked out, they booed Bernie in their caucus. I wasn't there, but I heard about it. Folks told me about it. They booed Bernie. They, they were angry. And I blame Bernie for their anger from this perspective. If you run for office, you have to be prepared to lose.
Right.
Running and winning are not the same thing.
Correct.
It takes enormous courage to run. But then and part of that courage has to be that you have to man up or woman up when you lose. These people just assumed that Bernie, was going to win. And they were mad. And they were poorly treated by the Democratic Party. And some of that may be true. Certainly the first day of the convention was dominated by all that Wasserman Schultz mess.
Right.
Debbie Wasserman Schultz's emails
Yeah, with the strategy to get Bernie out of there.
That she,
right.
Yeah, which was very unfortunate at best, and she ought to be ashamed.
This is a quick offset. Is it more unfortunate that they would be silly enough to script that out via email, or is it more unfortunate that and get caught, or that would be the mindset of the party? Because I feel like that we should know that would be their mindset, that they would support Hillary more than Bernie. But I'm just that's just a matter of opinion. But I'm just curious as to what you think the real tragedy or problem with that is in that instance.
That's a really good question. As we know with everything is really about relationships. At the end of the day, whether you're talking business, academia, whatever, relationships are as important very often as qualifications. In fact, sometimes more important. I've lost many a job or many an opportunity because someone else had a better relationship with a decision maker.
Right.
And while it's not fair, it's life. And it's life. That's how life works. I mean, people like to work with people they know and like. And the people that they can, how can I put it, that they have reasonable expectations about how they're going to interact. So from that perspective, Hillary Clinton has had a long-standing relationship with the Democratic Party, with various individuals inside the Democratic National Committee. She's had relationships. So I think that should have been very important, given that, for Debbie Wasserman Schultz to have maintained at least the appearance of fairness.
Correct.
And the appearance of fairness would be that the party doesn't take sides. And you talk to a lot of party activists. The party does not take sides, or should not take sides, in contested elections. That the party should provide the same resources to any of the candidates in an election, be it, in this case, Hillary, Bernie, Martin O'Malley, and there was some other little man who was running at a point in time.
Right.
But, that they should all have the same resources. They should, and after passing a certain threshold, a percentage in the polls or whatever, that they should essentially have access to the same mailing list, to the same party resources, to all of that.
Right.
So that
it should be for the greater good at some point.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because so I mean, that Wasserman Schultz didn't provide that, and that she actually plotted not to do it is just someplace past wrong.
Okay. Yeah.
And that so she ought to be ashamed. I mean, no one should ever be ashamed of their relationships, but they should definitely. There's right, there's wrong. I mean, there's a wink and a nod. So I'm sure that Hillary could probably have gotten things more quickly, and other things. But there is just being fair. However, let me say this to flip it. I do know that, again, this is all sort of inside baseball, having talked to friends.
Right. Well, and that's why we wanted to have you on, too, to get that perspective.
Is that the Bernie people were not, frankly, ready for prime time. And so things were requested of them. And it took them longer to get back to people than other people did.
Okay.
And so there are a lot of things where my thinking about the Bernie campaign is that Bernie Sanders ran to make a point. Antipathy toward Hillary was so high. Antipathy toward anger about the uneven distribution of our economic recovery has been so high that his campaign took off. And I think he did better than he even expected. Frankly, I think he ran to make a point, and instead of making a point, he made a movement because it was time. Because Democrats and Republicans have both been change averse, and he was coming in as Trump was, talking about change. Now, the change that he was talking about, Trump was talking about two different things, but he was coming in talking about change. And so he caught on. He did extraordinarily well. He challenged this candidate. He made her a better candidate. Democrats need to be very grateful to Bernie Sanders for having made her a better candidate, because he pushed her to the left He had her embrace the $15 wage, which she didn't do before he started talking about it and pushing her on it.
Right.
The free college tuition, which I have mixed feelings about, that's a whole other story.
Okay.
However, she went from something very tepid to something far more supportive, and opens a door for higher education leaders to really work with the White House and with the Congress in dealing with issues of college affordability. So, but he did better than he thought he was going to do, I think. And that's why, and he never essentially did the rules of the game. If you looked at if you look 8 years ago, as soon as Hillary Clinton saw that she didn't have the delegates, she folded. She endorsed President Obama. Her people, I remember 2008, I was at the convention in Denver when there were these women who called themselves Puma,
okay.
P-U-M-A, stood for Party Unity, My Hind Parts, and it wasn't hind parts.
Okay.
They were very angry, just like the Bernie people were. They walked out of convention, and one woman went to the Republican convention the following week and supported Sarah Palin, which was crazy. And but anyway, people do what they do. So what I'm saying is that the intense anger of the Bernie people is not unusual.
Okay.
I think that many of them will come around. I think maybe 10-15% of them won't, and that's okay. But I think that if we look at the future of our nation, as opposed to just, I think it's, Hillary's the one.
Okay.
Trump certainly isn't.
Right.
I mean, I am amused by the people who, seem to think that Mr. Trump will do well by black people. Really?
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot of those black people, and I guess I'd be fortunately that I don't. You know what? Really, I don't know a whole lot of Trump support. I know it sounds weird and almost cliche to say, but or maybe they're just closet.
Well, I don't know. Well, I know one or two because they're through politics, I ran into Omarosa at the convention. She was there.
Oh, okay.
And of course, she's going to be she was at the Democratic, of course, and she's going to be the head of Trump's African American outreach, which I think I find amusing.
I know her name, Omarosa Manigault Stallworth. I guess it's not her name anymore, but I only know that because of Trump in The Apprentice. So I guess she's got to ride with the one who brought her, dance with the one who brought her. So, but that's just
that's what they always say, don't they?
Right? Yeah, yeah. But okay. So yeah. So I guess she was just anyway. All right. I'll leave my opinions about her for another show. Okay. But no. Yeah. I don't.
She's doing what she does,
right.
And she's a smart woman.
Correct. Yes.
She's good people.
Yes.
But at the same time, as you say, you know about her through Mr. Trump, and she has been very eager to get on that bandwagon. And I suppose that if Mr. Trump were elected, that she would have a visible role in his administration. And I guess it's up to you to decide whether it's a good thing or not.
Correct. Right. Yes.
But again, my time, effort, energy, and money are going to Hillary Clinton.
Right.
I'm excited that she's in the race.
Okay.
I think that she makes a huge difference any number of ways, and that's that. I think that we need to support her.
And we've been a little tepid in our support. We actually did an episode. It was called "Tepid is the New Black." Was the name of the episode. Because,
interesting. I like that.
And I don't take credit for that. Actually, one of our guests, Kevin Bartini, he's the one that mentioned that. But it was, we were talking about this, and when he said that, I thought it was very apt for what we do. Tepid is the new black. But okay, so I know you've got to run, but I've got one last question for you because it has to do with the use of the term minority versus marginalized, and I bring it up because our guest last week was Christina Wong. She's a Chinese American performance artist and writer and a lot of things. But we talked a little bit about the election, but more so about racism and how she sees it as a Chinese woman or as an Asian woman. And but anyway, we got into the terms of my use of the term minority, obviously in the title and just generally. And I think you use it at the top of the interview. And then obviously you also use the term marginalized when talking about the actual impact of what's happening. So her question to me was about that term and she was making the point that using marginalized is better than using minority, and maybe that better is too strong of a term. But I wanted to get your just opinion on that as far as when it comes to. I thought marginalized had much more of a negative connotation, and so when I'm talking about us, I don't want to use marginalized, but if I'm in the context of an actual conversation, it makes sense. So I don't know if there's a question in that. I hope there is, but I just want to get your opinion on the two terms.
From a semantic perspective, I usually use a term. I usually talk about black people as black people and other people of color as people of color, and it's also, quite frankly, soon to be inaccurate to call the combination of people of color minority, because we are about to be, in probably a generation, the majority.
2042. That's the right.
So just from a semantic perspective, I think that all these terms need to be essentially examined.
Okay.
We use a term. I use the term minority at the start of your show because that was the name of your show.
Okay.
And you use the term to describe your show because you're basically looking at people of color issues, and people of color are still minority.
Correct.
And so to describe the show, using the word minority is not inaccurate nor distasteful. It's real because it basically describes what you do. All people of color are not marginalized, however. There are marginalized people, marginalized by class, and many of those are white. Marginalized by most people of color are marginalized, but not all. And we have to begin to talk more. We have these conversations about class and about the extent to which, when we talk about class, people who do not have the income or the conditions, people who college could be furthest from their mind.
Right.
Certain things are furthest from their mind. And working class people all too often are marginalized. And so we have to look at that too. I like the term, I won't say I like the term, but I think the term marginalized is very descriptive and important. So I would definitely say that the young lady, the Asian sister who you interviewed last week, I've forgotten her name already.
Yeah, Christina Wong, right, yes.
Right. I think that she makes a very good point, and she makes a very important point to think about marginalization. So
okay.
I would simply say that as we fight for social and economic justice, we should be careful and thoughtful about our vocabulary.
I agree.
Careful and thoughtful. I'm not saying that any particular description is right or wrong. I'm just saying that it's what you said to me is a reminder for me, and hopefully a reminder for your listeners, and a reminder for all of us to be both careful and thoughtful about the words we use to describe the situations we're in, the people who are in those situations, and what that means.
No,
we will not. People of color are not going to always be a minority, and some people look at the word minority pejoratively.
Right.
And we need to, have conversations about that. Why do you see that as a pejorative? But marginalization is a word that really describes a relationship to an economic system. And if you look at that, so we've got marginalized people who are not employed, and we can go down the list and call the roll about all the things that contribute to marginalization. But it's a term that's useful, and as I think about it, is a very visual term.
Right. Yeah. Like I said, the connotation I think is, I say negative. I don't know, but I feel like it's much more visceral when you say marginalization or marginalized versus just saying minority, because you're putting a real face to that. Everyone can figure out or equate what the margins look like, or being in the margins. It's very it paints
very
that.
Much so.
Yeah, it's very descriptive. So, and that's why I was just. I was a little like, I think that's a little more negative than I mean when talking about the collective us. However, if that's what we're feeling at the time, it certainly it makes sense at certain times. So anyway, I'm glad we got to have that dialogue to kind of hash it out further. So yeah.
Thank you. Actually, thank you for raising that, because as I said, it gives me something to think about, really, in terms of when we sort of think about, semantics.
Correct.
And
yes.
I think that semantics are as important as anything else, because, words have power.
Right, yeah, especially in this day and age where it's all, it's Twitter, 140 characters, it's sound bite. Well, it's probably always been sound bites and everything else. But when we're talking about the language, Black Lives Matter, then Blue Lives Matter, and all these hashtags, everything is so, catchy, bang, bang, bang. We have to be very intentional, as you mentioned, in what we say, especially in this new paradigm as we shift, changing from a black president for good, bad, and different, that level of representation. Now what we will have, hopefully with Hillary coming in, and then having to still make a stand and come out of the margins, I guess, as best we can, and try to combat Trump and whatever's happening over there. So I know you have to go. So I really appreciate your time this morning. Appreciate the conversation and the insight. And I also
thank you for interviewing me, and my book is available on Amazon.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to
say that.
Right. I was gonna throw it back to you to mention the name of the book and to say where it's available. So yes, so yeah.
Okay, so the book is called "Are We Better Off?" and the subtitle is "Race, Obama, and Public Policy." It's a collection of columns, but it's also got significant new material, an introduction that talks about hope in history, that puts our president in context and talks about the way he's been treated, but also about the way he treats us. Then there are 80 columns. In the epilogue, we look at the numbers and look at, the fact that incomes haven't risen, that black colleges have been cut, historically black colleges have been cut, and any number of other things. But I think if we're looking at 2016, the most compelling part of the book might be that last 2 pages where I talk about 2016 and beyond and questions that anyone has to answer if they're dealing with African-American people.
All right. Well, great. I can't wait to check that out, and I hope that all our listeners do. Again, thank you. Hopefully we can have you back on as the season progresses, or to talk about some more specific issues to the things that because we need to get into jobs and everything that you're obviously your authority on a lot of items. So I appreciate it, Dr. Malveaux. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Okay. Thank you so much. Looking forward to talking to you again.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey, thanks to Dr. Malveaux for coming on the show. Hope you guys enjoyed our conversation. Make sure you check out her book, Are We Better Off? Available on Amazon and where books are sold. Follow the show on Twitter at Vocal Report, Facebook at The Vocal Minority Report. Go to iTunes or your podcast app on iOS. Type in The Vocal Minority Report. Leave a rating, leave a review, tell a friend. Thanks again for downloading, and we'll talk to you next episode. Peace.